Welcome back to Kintsugi Heroes, helping people tell the stories they need to share so you can find the stories that you need to hear.
In this episode, psychologist Gunter Swaboda shares his journey from a childhood shaped by family conflict and generational trauma to becoming a leader in men's well-being. Influenced early on by philosophy and Buddhism, Gunter learned the value of self-awareness and intentional growth. By facing his own struggles with anxiety and challenging the traditional expectations of masculinity, he developed a more humanistic and inclusive approach to life. Through personal reflection and dedicated work in therapy, he overcame adversity and now inspires others to embrace authentic transformation.
So, Kintsugi Heroes, friends and fans, welcome to another Kintsugi Heroes conversation, Stories That Matter. And it's a deep, deep privilege today for me to share a man who I love talking to and love listening to even more pointedly, Gunter Swaboda. Gunter, welcome to Kintsugi Heroes.
Thanks, John. What a wonderful introduction. I'll need to polish up my humility after that one.
My job's to affirm and it's your job to manage ego, right? So
Yeah.
I'm going to keep going because you are a noted psychologist and author, both non-fiction and fiction. You have award-winning films out there. You're a consultant on scripts and you have a podcast that is number one on the men's psychology or men's well-being kind of list, and number 5 in the US. Is that right? So tens of thousands of downloads. That is amazing.
140,000 downloads a week.
Now, I mentioned earlier that it's I'm a little sheepish. That puts me into the sheepish space, right? Because I'm comfortable with a few hundred, few thousand, right? But I love that because you are a clinician.
Yes.
But you're also a storyteller. And that,
yeah.
So obviously your life has created the man you are now with all the interests and so on. And, 30 years married, many years being a local hero to the broken of us. And also, a surfer, family man, father, sportsman, in that life, what created the man who's now the storyteller, both the technical and the and the stories that are inspiring the world generally?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. Some of it is completely unconscious, okay? So probably the best way to put that in a frame is that I became awake when I started reading philosophy and especially Buddhism. It's not just being a bloke, it's actually becoming a bloke. And that has a lot to do with me and my intention.
Yeah, wow.
It's not something that I just need to float along with and react to. So there were some fairly important experiences that one was a conflict between my parents. So as a kid growing up, there was a lot of conflict in the home, generally fairly well contained, but it was there, it was palpable. The other part of it was having a very, very powerful mother in many respects. This is a woman who had complex PTSD and survived, Vienna during the Russian invasion. And, in the beginning, I thought she was just a little bent, she'd carry around heaps of money in a bag with lots of papers. I thought, that's seriously weird. Yeah. And then when I started psychology, I realized that she actually suffered from complex PTSD, but managed it really well. And my father was a very gentle man in very, very many respects, hated conflict. Similarly, because him growing up in Vienna at the same time, he just never really recovered from that experience, even though he was young.
Yeah.
So the thing that stood out in my home was living according to values. And Mum tried to get me down the Christian pathway, which was never a really good fit. I mean, I came up with varying questions that neither my mother nor the minister in the church really answered satisfactorily. So I decided at that point, it was probably just before I turned 19, that people have a right to believe what they believe as long as it doesn't impede or harm others.
Yeah.
That was my benchmark. And so from philosophy, I went into psychology, which brought me into therapy because I had serious performance anxiety and statistics.
Yeah.
I was a basket case with it.
I can identify with that completely.
Yeah. So I went from this idea, which is quite interesting because I actually at the time didn't put it together. The philosophy and especially Buddhism was about being whole, but suffering from performance anxiety. I had it in my head that somehow I was broken
Yeah. Yeah.
and needed to be fixed.
Mm.
And when I went into therapy, very quickly, and I was very fortunate, the therapist basically set me right. And within about 6 months, I stopped therapy in that way because it was essentially CBT, but he had a certain bent to it.
Yeah.
And then I continued my studies. In hindsight, I wasn't exactly a brilliant student. It was the 70s and early 80s. So, music, girls, having a good time was sort of priority.
Mm.
And you and I have talking about the fact that I reckon if I was a kid these days, even a young man, and a psychiatrist got hold of me to be like ADHD, and a number of oppositional defiance disorder, because I really had an issue with authority.
I find it funny that the diagnosis of oppositional defiance and ADHD has usually been by girlfriends, not psychologists, right? So
that's a very good insight, John.
It's amazing. There's so much in that, Gunter. So the generational trauma of a world war, right, and international conflict and so on. Do you think that's still something that we're given, the need to work out finally after multiple generations? Because in many ways, I look at our past generation, and I see them hiding it or holding it, right, not working it out.
A lot of my work currently is looking at the connection between personal growth and social and cultural change. And so we've got a lot to work through that we haven't even touched, right?
Yeah.
And so the other part to it is that traumas like that, World War II and so, continue for generations. I mean, the conflict in the Middle East is fundamentally the legacy of multiple complex traumatic events within the population, and each person holds that within themselves. And you can't move on until you've done the inner work. You've recognized the pain, the wound, and you process it.
Yeah. Wow.
Because you project it out into the world.
So you said something earlier. You said the word woke, right? Which is, I love the idea of, and I want to reclaim woke, and particularly woke bloke, right? Because
we're on the same page, buddy.
Yeah. So because like waking up and doing the work is the ultimate expression of, I often mention that that's the hard yards for a bloke, right? Being the typical bloke is easy, right? It's being someone who explores and seeks their own inner world is the tough one. But where did you, is that a function of having a capacity? Are we born with a capacity to go there or a propensity to go there? And then the culture or the family situation. So you grew up on the beaches, didn't you? Right. So
yeah.
And so it's not the great, it doesn't protect anyone from going through tough times inside. It's a beautiful outside, right? It's not So how did does that give you the space to start the process of becoming woke, right? Waking up?
To me, woke is about having humanistic values.
Yeah.
That for some reason or another, particular political ideology has chosen to delegitimize. Essentially, by the time I was 15, I was a hippie.
Yeah. Yeah.
right? I surfed, but I was also out of step in some ways because I started surfing longboards,
Yeah.
right? 1970, as the shortboard revolution was happening.
Yeah.
So people used to, pay out on me when I'd come out in the surf with a longboard. What are you doing with that thing? And there was a group that I hung with who, the Mona boys, who were staunchly into surfing anything.
Yeah.
And that resonated with me. Part of that was, by 15, I was in Greenpeace marches. I was into saving whales. I was into really exploring what they refer to as counterculture, which is the whole sense of spirituality. And that's where I woke up to recognizing that religion is an ideological premise, a dogma,
Yeah.
and dogma is ego confining. It doesn't allow the ego to grow. And so spirituality, on the other hand, is when we really practice it from the heart, is expansive.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the one thing that I saw in a large group of the sort of tribe called surfers was that it was manifesting very patriarchal attitudes, the traditional masculine values. So you had the territory, so localism. Then you had the pecking order, and if you're really top surfer, that's where you would go. And then it was about as many ways as you could get that put you on another level.
Yeah.
And it was highly combative. And then if none of that worked, you punt out of the guy next to you.
The idea of dropping in being a mortal offence, right?
Yes.
It's quite symbolic, right, of so much that goes wrong in community. I always found it interesting because, I was a ski paddler, right, which was like evil, right? But the amazing, tribalism of surf, right, in many ways reflects so much that was missing in young blokes' lives at that time, right? So they found each other as a family and identified in the tribe, and that supported them. Did that wake your sense of like needing to be a supporter or a helper or a healer?
No, I think the drive to grow as a human being came, I think, mainly from my experience within my family.
Yeah.
Because I didn't really participate. I remember at about 15, 16 trying to get a girlfriend into surfing, and I got heaps from the guys, and she certainly got a lot more. And at the same time, puberty blues came out.
Yeah, yeah.
And that was a monumental shift for me because I suddenly saw the misogyny in culture.
Yeah.
And I went, no, you know what? This is wrong.
Yeah.
This is not humanistic. So what's behind it? So that went into the cupboard actually for a while because the pressure, my girlfriend just gave up, then we broke up.
Yeah.
Because I think she sort of projected some of the pain onto me as a cause. I'm a bloke, I'm one of the bad boys. But then I started working with Vietnam vets. When I came out of university, I was actually working in drug and alcohol a lot. But a lot of my clients came to me either through probation or parole or the vets groups. And somehow they stuck with me. With a lot of other counselors and therapists, they move on. Some of them had, endless encounters for short periods of time. And I got very interested in the whole trauma experience, and it resonated with me. Partly because of my own generational stuff.
Yeah.
And I realized that what we were prescribing to help veterans with, which was fundamentally cognitive behavioral therapy, didn't get a lot of traction because in one of the groups, I literally had a palace revolution. They basically said, we've done it before, we're not doing this. So in my training, which was now starting to shift into more humanistic existential psychotherapies, I realized that we're not actually meeting them where they are.
Yeah.
And that trauma was very much embodied, in the physical experience. So I started, working very much existentially with people. And part of it was also I started talking about, and no one picked up on this, about moral injury.
Yeah.
That
Well.
not only is trauma a physical, psychological, social trauma, it's a moral injury.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that seemed to really make a lot of difference. I started training also in systems therapy, family therapy, where I realized that a lot of these guys actually came into their deep wound of trauma through combat because they'd already been traumatized in the family dynamics.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, for some reason, I just kept getting more men working with me,
Yeah.
And then when I went into private practice, the same thing. I started doing workplace rehab consultancy. And a lot of my clients were men, which was really unusual. My supervisors and stuff kept saying, I don't have that mix. You have a particular mix. And so because my wife, and she's part of what I do, okay? So the books and everything, she's part of that. We started having conversations about feminism, like deep conversations about feminism. At the time, especially in the mid to late 80s, there was the first wave of the men's movement, right? And so, I was really interested in that. Robert Bly, who I discovered was a bit of a misogynist. He had issues with women.
We're all, they had to start somewhere, right? So,
absolutely.
Iron John and all that stuff is, it's the beginning, right?
Yeah,
So,
don't get me wrong, I really liked it, right? And then, the men's workshops, and, we had a conversation, and she goes, so how does this actually make men better in relationship?
Yeah.
And I went, boom, it was like, oh, yeah, okay. Well, it actually doesn't.
Right.
With some men, it actually makes them more selfish, more narcissistic.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And we got the same problem as we had in surfing, which is it's tribal.
Yeah.
There's an ideology with this.
Yeah.
Right. And so the recognition that patriarchy fundamentally is shaping all of this without us really knowing it started to bubble up.
Yeah.
And, we've softened it out. Now in academia, people refer to traditional masculine norms. I use that phrase, but I don't actually, because it doesn't get to the heart of it. Patriarchy is a bit like being indoctrinated in a political ideology.
Yeah. It's a training framework, surely, right? Like men are trained to do, like if they act in a certain way that they're not even aware of, somebody created that framework for training them like that, right? So,
well, it starts off literally when she's pregnant.
Yeah.
What are you having?
Yeah.
Oh, don't know. Well, these days, a lot of people know. Oh, we're having a girl. Oh, is that sweet?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? With a boy, oh, that's so good, and then we have the gender reveal stuff, pink for girls and blue for boys. Yeah. If I go back to Victorian areas, the pink would have been for boys and the blue for girls. This is a social construct.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, the moment the kid's born, we treat them differently. And this is where that's internalized. So the kid doesn't need to be 5 years old to learn how to kick a footy. He's already been brought into the tribe, the culture. Yeah. So one of the things that I'm really, really interested in is the culturalization of masculinity. And one of the areas that I'm really interested in, because the question that I have now is we've gone through 2 waves of the men's process. Right, we need a third one because what we've got so far, with respect to everything that's going on, and I really appreciate everybody's efforts in this, we've got a finger in the dike. I'm not seeing the reduction in domestic violence, and I'm talking both ways. I'm not seeing a significant improvement of generalized mental health. And I'm not seeing massive reductions in suicide.
We're not seeing any reductions in suicide. So,
So the obvious question to me as a clinician, but also, philosopher, scientist, is what are we missing?
Yeah, totally.
What are we missing? And This might go down really well. I've just signed up to do a master's and then a PhD.
Nice. Right.
And what I'm interested in is male therapists' internalized masculine norms,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
right? Because I know from experience that it can come out.
Yeah.
In the beginning, I used to, if a bloke got a little bit too emotional, I'd let him go, but then I'd want to pat him down.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I'd have to resist the urge to jump in there,
Yeah.
right, and help them to stop crying.
Yeah. Yeah. The anchoring bit, it's like a natural, oh, yeah, okay, quick. No one, just hide this bit and give you a second, then I'll drag you out of that emotional experience, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like when you talk about bias, right? Even, programmers bias in their programming and the algorithms they create, right? I actually put their male bias into that. So it's interesting.
Yes.
We're actually ninja training young kids through the biases of the programmers, right? So yeah.
But when you've got your little brother telling you, don't stand like that, girls stand like that.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah.
It speaks volumes.
Yeah, totally. I had a question. All right. So, your life created a woke bloke. Is that a path that contains signposts for how we share the concept of, introducing men into doing a bit more work?
In a way, because it's values based, right? So the values are about being inclusive. They're about sharing. They're about being, emotionally literate. They're about being emotionally responsive. Don't blame others for what's happening to you. I mean, yes, there might be an element in that. And but the other question is, if you're being harmed in a relationship, and I get a lot of this, I see a lot of men who are in relationships with women who are as patriarchal as a lot of men.
Yeah,
that's the best way to put it. Right? They're highly critical. They're very dominating. They're coercively controlling, and in some instances, they're violent.
Yeah,
you got to ask yourself the question: why are you staying there?
Yeah.
If someone treats me like that, they get 3 strikes and I'm out the door.
Yeah.
That comes from a sense of feeling empowered.
Yeah.
Right? And unfortunately, culturally and individually, a lot of men are enculturated to fear their own sense of self in an empowered way. I don't want to use the word power because that comes out of patriarchal dominance thinking, right? But it's this sense of, I'm okay. I'm responsible for feeling safe and secure. And if someone threatens that and challenges that, I've got some choices that I need to make, even though it may be scary and uncomfortable, but I need to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
It's a bit like firemen who race into the burning house and everyone goes, hero, right? Yeah. Well, that thing applies in other parts of our lives.
Yeah. And it's interesting because in certain contexts with training and intention, running into a burning house is a hero act, but running into a burning house without that sort of intention, training, or reason is a really dopey act, right? So it's that, it's the application of values and intention and framework that actually turn that activity into something worthwhile, right? Which is fascinating. You talk about values and safety. You've used those 2 words. So, and they're making decisions. So really creating a decision matrix, right, requires you to know who you are and to be safe and solid and empowered to make that decision. So, values and safety, identity and safety. How do we work on improving men's willingness to explore those ideas?
I think it's like you dangle the carrot.
Yeah.
Is your life running the way that you really want it to be? And do you experience life as fully as you possibly can?
Yeah.
Now, in my view, 80% of guys out there, if they're totally honest and put hand on heart, go, no. And often it's not the externals, it's the internals where they're in a state of conflict.
Yeah.
Right? And so if I use a Freudian term that we don't use much anymore, which is a pity, is that they're caught in a neurotic complex. There is the social expectation how to be, and there is their inner desire how to be.
Yeah, yeah.
And so in that context, they often freeze. It's almost like the same trauma. You either get out there, you fight, you run away, or you freeze.
Yeah, yeah.
And a lot of us as men freeze at that point.
Yeah.
Because that deep, deep conflict, that neurotic conflict is embedded in our, in our deep-seated psychological wound. And this is one of the reasons why something like cognitive behavioral therapy doesn't quite get it, because we need to go through the conscious, we need to explore the area of the subconscious, and we need to explore the unconscious where the actual, bleeding wound sits. And it's, opening that up is painful.
Yeah.
But it's rewarding.
Yeah, and essential in some ways to become the man who, because we've got, jobs to pass it on. You've got 2 adult kids, right? Who you are is also passing on, the way they interact with the world, helping them woke up, right?
Yep.
So whatever that said. Just a really fascinating thought there, right? When you mentioned the internal and the external, the neurotic challenge that we have. The internal, is that like the conflict comes about because we're comparing ourselves in the real world we find ourselves in with is it an idealized view? Are we looking at the wrong role models? Who are we comparing ourselves to fall short against?
Mostly, I think we compare ourselves to those who we want to be like, right? And so, in a masculine tribal sense, we want to, using that terminology, we want to be that alpha. Well, at 5'4", you're not really, especially if you're already fully grown, that is a serious problem.
Yeah.
So, and it's even a problem if it's a boy who's, a year younger than the cohort, he's not going to keep up physically.
Yeah.
So we need to find a way to help that boy to be validated in their physicality. But the other part to it is that all those expectations, the external expectations, are internalized. They're internalized from a very, very young age. If you look at, the media, especially, watch the Disney films.
Yeah.
Right? All that sort of stuff just steeps into the fabric, into the DNA of the growing boy. And that sets up, conflict, because what if he doesn't like footy?
Yeah.
What's playing a flute? So it's because we've got this very either or way of looking at things, it reinforces that internal complex, that neurotic conflict.
Yeah.
This is how I should be, but I'm not like that. And so one of the biggest issues that I get working with men is to let go of some preconception about how their brain. It's a bit like dealing with guilt. Guilt is, I've done something bad. Shame is, I'm bad.
Yeah, and it's interesting because, in my travels, a lot of men, even good, solid men who seem to be quite anchored in their own identity, are really being hurt by the claims, that men are violent, that men are weak, that men are uncaring, that men are unable to speak. So, what should we be taking from those kind of, commentaries?
This is where I took a real turn, because the first men's movement, in a way, was to reinforce the male tribe, right? Without examining what values it's built on. Okay, it's we're boys, we hang together, irrespective of good or bad. Don't dob on your mate, even though he's turned the house on fire. The second wave was fundamentally, in many respects, about looking at men and men's behavior and how they deal with emotions as pathological. We're broken. We need to fix them. And this is where we've got this backlash that's brought out of the woodwork people like Andrew Tate, Jordan Peterson, Joe Rogan, right?
Yeah.
where they don't go on an inward journey. They live a projection
Yeah.
of their internalized ideal, male.
Yeah. Wow.
They're in many respects empty. I mean,
Mm.
I saw him in an interview recently where the interviewer asked him, how is he? Right? It was a recent interview, and he said, well, he thought about it, you know what he does. And he goes, brilliantly. And then there was a pause, and then he goes, terribly. Now, as a therapist, what that tells me is this man is absolutely frozen in his neurotic conflict.
Yeah.
He can't be one or the other.
Yeah.
You can experience it as a dynamic, but not as two states. I mean, I can be feeling on top of the world, and if
Yeah.
you
And
throw
then,
me out in 10-foot waves,
yeah.
I'm going to be scared, right? Like out of my comfort zone. That's okay. But this coexistence in conflict of these two emotional states, that's where it's problematic. And so, we need to find, and this is where my work really is going, and still will go for quite a while, for a third wave that teaches men that they're not broken,
Yeah.
that they've been programmed by a system of thinking that is really unhealthy.
Yeah.
And I don't like the word toxic,
No.
right? Because there's certain elements, if I put it in the right context,
Yeah.
right, is useful.
Yeah, we can inoculate by, going towards the very thing that poisons us and having an a controlled experience of it, which inoculates us. Right.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And that really, we need to be open enough not to believe that there is one way of being male.
Yeah.
There's many different ways. And that you have a right to choose how that's going to go.
Yeah.
Where do you want to be as a person? And so to me, in a sense, helping men to grow in that way is only a step towards being more fully human.
Yeah.
Without the categorization.
I love that idea. To step into your power is to be empowered to choose who you actually want to be and how you show to the world, right? What you're prepared to own. You mentioned like Jordan Peterson and Andrew Tate, and they're the banner names, right? It's interesting with Jordan Peterson, from what me watching, it's almost like he started out brilliantly and his journey has been one of becoming less certain and less relevant, right? It's a strange, now he's, he's still a brilliant man, but I'm not sure I can, even sort of align with what he's saying, although first up he had some, wonderful teaching moments, right? So, but
I mean, there's gems in what he says. There are some gems, right? The problem is that the overall framework is seriously flawed.
Yeah.
And which, to me, as a clinical psychologist, is puzzling. And like Gabor Mate says, he's trapped by his own rage.
Yeah.
Because as long as he sticks to his area of expertise, which is clinical psychology, he's not too bad. Although how he could miss the blind spot that if you take Xanax regularly, you're going to be addicted. I don't know how he missed that one. But anyway, he did. So the other stuff, in many respects, I'd love to actually sit down with him, and if I could switch off his sort of rhetorical sleight of hand that he does, and have an honest, deep conversation with him. This sounds arrogant perhaps, but if he needs to be in therapy. This is a man who does not like women. I don't know what his relationship with his mother was like, but I bet it wasn't all that great shot. And he's extraordinarily controlling by all the reports of his wife. So it's sad in a way because there are these gems of brilliance in him, but they have gotten lost. They're embedded in this ambivalent relationship with the sort of Judeo-Christian thinking, which reinforces that patriarchal ideology, and therefore the misogyny that comes through in that.
my sense, like Jordan Peterson is a high profile example of what I see in blokes where there's a sense of being betrayed by or the promises, the unstated, assumptions and promises of masculinity. So, patriarchal approaches means, hierarchy, competition, that there's this sense of power and victory. And yet most men lead, to quiet, lives of quiet desperation, right? We feel lost. We feel unfulfilled. We feel like our potential is unrecognized.
Lonely.
We isolated. It's very difficult for us to find that truly unconditional intimacy from so many people. And of course, all of that is so nurturing, so empowering, and the lack of it it's almost, not only do we feel the lack of it in struggling, to fill those gaps, but the sense of being betrayed by the promise of being a man, the promise of power and so on. Is that like, am I kind of missing the point here, or is, what is that to you?
No. You've put your finger on it. And if I go into the political economic sphere, right, it's the same as what neoliberalism did. It promised that if we deregulate, right, the economic system and make corporations have more money, that money will trickle down to the rest of the community. And guess what? It didn't happen. I'm still looking for it.
Yeah, where's that leak? Right.
Yeah, absolutely. 1,350% increases in C-level salaries, but over the last 25 to 30 years, the actual worker has no increase in real salary or in conditions. Yeah. And this is the same. And so the influence of patriarchal ideology, which is embedded within our socio-cultural and economic system, has betrayed us.
Yeah.
It's not women. Women haven't betrayed us.
No.
Neoliberalism as a patriarchal form brought them out of the house into corporations because it makes more money to have women in the workforce. And it doesn't really care whether that means that women don't have as much time caring for children. Now, don't get me wrong, because I've had women hassling me. So what? We should stay in the kitchen? Absolutely not. We need a social change that allows both men and women to take equal share in the care of the family.
Yeah, it's a human thing, not a...
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
So I'm really passionate about that.
Yeah, beautiful. You mentioned earlier, right, that women who are adopting a patriarchal framework are often, getting ahead. They're the ones who are leading the charge, right, by being successful and breaking through the glass ceiling. But they're using the same leadership
ideology,
leadership concepts that men use, right?
Yeah.
Patriarchy is not related to gender; it's a style of leadership, right? So and a culture.
And we can see that in politics.
Yeah.
Look how tone deaf the Liberal Party is.
And it's interesting. You mentioned, the third wave needs to be about, throwing out the way we've done engagement, relationships, and bringing a much more relational, much more inside out view of how we do it. You often hear men claim that men can't share or talk or ask for help or whatever, or men don't do that well. Is that true?
Yeah, it's territorial. I was talking to someone the other day. The reason why my early academic career was really sketchy was I never put my hand up for help.
Yeah.
It never occurred to me to go to someone and ask, listen, I'm really stuck here. I did it the hard way. I sort of tried to work it out myself. And sometimes that worked. And, because I'm relatively intelligent, that wasn't, that rare. But on the other hand, it made it very difficult. And there was some really big disappointments in it.
Yeah.
Because, later on when I started reflecting on how I operate, I went, boy, I could have been so much further ahead in a lot of things.
Yeah.
you know. And part of that was too because I'm an only child. You know, as an only child, when you got two preoccupied parents in their own conflict nest,
Yeah.
you get a lot of support on one level, but
Yeah.
bugger all on another.
Yeah, wow. And of course, needs, who asks the kid or a young bloke, what they need, right? So young men are in a bit of a crisis. We hear that everywhere, right? I'm sure they're not doing what we did, which is not necessarily a crisis, but because I'm not sure we did, everything right either. But I'd be wondering, what do you think is the thing, speaking of needs, what do you think that our young men are missing out on? What do they need?
They need parenting and nurturing, right, in a way that's not determined on the boy model.
Right.
We need to bring them into emotional conversations at a very early age. So, it's this, a lot of men and a lot of dads and a lot of boys actually don't have the emotional literacy, the vocabulary to express their experience, and we accept that at 13 it gets worse and they grunt.
Yeah.
Well, my view, that just doesn't float with me at all.
Yeah.
Dude, isn't a form of communication other than you seem to have lost the capacity for speech. I can get more from a chimpanzee.
Yeah, exactly. Right?
And that requires fathers who are self-aware, flexible, adaptable, emotionally expressive, emotionally responsible, that own their stuff. So rather than lecturing the kid, we actually have a dialogue, we become the slave pit supervisor. Have you done the homework? What about the lawn? You know?
Yeah.
And all the kid wants to do is get out of there. So they do. And technology has given them the perfect out, the digital device. It's a really interesting idea. My wife talks about the Industrial Revolution as killing the planet.
Yeah.
She sees the IT revolution as killing human society.
Yeah, wow.
And I agree. I completely agree with that.
Yeah. That absolutely worries me, like what you say. Impractical optimism then says, luckily, this is the first bad bit. And then we work out everything that went wrong and try and end up fixing it. But, it is a huge debate at the moment how we manage and, how we integrate the technology coming along. One of the things you talk about is it's a form of avoidance. You just mentioned that, it gets in the way, right? So we're now, using communication through tech means rather than direct. Do we throw out? We can't backtrack on IT. There's too many billionaires telling us what to do and making money off us. So, how are we going to undermine the bad influence?
By stepping into our own sense of empowerment, because that allows me to make decisions. So do I just doom scroll? Because not only is it an avoidance, it's a sedation.
Yeah.
And we know that neurophysiologically as well, right?
Yeah.
And so, and the irony in it is that sedation actually then creates more anxiety. It's a bit like taking Xanax, right?
Yeah.
Works really well to cut through anxiety, like within 20 minutes. But when it wears off, you feel so much more anxious.
Yeah.
Right. So what do? You take another Xanax.
Yeah.
Right. So this is no, in a sense, any different. And so, living around the northern beaches and being outside a lot and so on, the number of mothers and fathers that I see going for a walk with their kids where they've got their face in the phone rather than communicating with the child. And it was a beautiful example. One day I was on the balcony and it overlooks the road, and there was a guy who pulled in. It was a beautiful summer's day. He'd obviously promised his daughter they're going to go to the beach. So she's out of the car. He's got the boot open. The phone rings, right? And I thought, I'll just watch this, right? They don't know that I'm there. There could be, spying issues around that. But anyway, he's on the phone and he's walking around. He's on the phone. It's obviously, a bit intense. And she goes, Dad, and he's going like this, and she starts taking things out of the boot. And he's going like this when she goes, Dad. It ended up her screaming at him
Wow.
to get off the phone,
Yeah.
and then he screams back at her for being a little brat.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow.
You selfish kid, you. And I'm like, what the,
Yeah.
where's the adult in the room? It's actually that 10 or 12-year-old that's there going, Dad, I'm here,
Yeah.
right?
Wow.
And so not only we do that big time with boys,
Yeah.
because they're socialized into that, by the way. So mums pick them up, give them a kiss, pop them down and go off and play. Girls are usually picked up, put on their lap, and they begin to participate in the conversation with the other woman.
Wow, I hadn't even thought that.
We have observational studies of that.
Wow.
Right? So my point is, where do we start? One, we need to have men heal themselves from the legacy of patriarchal socialization so that I'm much more deeply aware of my own wound, allow it to heal, and become emotionally literate, responsive, and relationally ethical. That when I'm present with someone, I am fully present. I haven't got half of my head's not out the door thinking about work or thinking about the footy game.
Yeah.
Or, honey, can you get me another beer? Well, you've had 5. Why do you need another one?
I love that term, emotionally ethical. That's going to stay with me. So it's such an interesting idea too. Like I feel the call to action you're offering there, right? To step up and be a better dad, a better bloke, more present into our community and our family, right? But it's an individual call. I didn't choose to be patriarchal, right?
No, and neither did I.
Yeah. So like I didn't choose to be aggressive, combative, competition. Like I've watched a group of blokes from a church group go down and spend some time with each other, like playing 10-pin bowls. By the end of it, it's World War III, right?
Yes.
Right. And I go, hang on, you guys love each other, right? What's going on? I didn't spend time, learning that. It was just something that was given to me. It was my place in the world. So why am I at fault now?
Well, you're not at fault.
But that isn't everyone telling me. It's my job to not be the way that they, the only way I knew to be created, right? Like, aren't we being individually held accountable for the actions that come from that patriarchal myth?
Well, because the social change isn't happening. So the only starting point we have is with me, I. And honestly, I've seen this, is once the light goes on and we go, oh, I've been played.
Yeah.
Right? I need to do something about that. And then I infuse that into my family and my community as much as I can. Yeah. But then that can take me to becoming an activist as well.
Yeah.
Right? Because we need activism.
Yeah. Gandhi, be the change you want in the world, right? So that's what we're advocating here, is it? Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely. The dogs of war are out at the moment.
Yeah.
And the chains being held by the old guard. They might be 22, but they're the old guard.
Yeah.
Right? And we haven't been able to do it successfully. And this is because this stuff runs so deep. Yeah. But we need to change the fabric of society through changing ourselves individually, personally, because that change stops being radically individual. It now becomes more communitarian.
Yeah.
Now if you're in the United States and you talk like that, they go, you're a communist.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And not really.
Marxists, I'd be deported back to Marxist Australia, right? So
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And my comment is nothing further from the truth.
I agree. So I love that call to action for an individual. I make that call to blokes. Time to do some work, and that work means becoming a better man. Right? What is it in them? Let's go to, say, one of the patriarchal qualities, which is what's in it for me, right? So, what is in it for men to change?
Oh, the first, what's in it for me is an expression of fear.
Yeah.
It comes from a place of lack, right? It also comes from a place of desiring acquisition to feel better within the social hierarchy,
Yeah.
right? So the idea is, as long as you're chasing a ghost, it's going to feel empty.
Yeah.
Nourish yourself with the things that are of value. How many people are 90 years old and they go, I really should have made more millions.
Yeah.
I've seen 90-year-olds on their deathbed. I've been with them. And usually what they're saying in their last breath is, I wish my family was here. So, I speak very plainly about this because, yes, I can speak academically as well, but I've found that plain language gets across to blokes really well.
Yeah.
Are you living the life that you really feel is fulfilling and enriching?
Yeah.
How's your relationship with your wife? Okay, so let's talk about the kids. How are the kids? Well, you know what they're like. They're teenagers,
Yeah.
right? They're avoiding me. Well, have you thought why that might be the case?
Yeah.
And wouldn't you like it to be different? Oh, I love it to be different, but I don't have the time. Okay.
Yeah. Well.
So why is it that you don't have the time? Well, I need to put another story on my story house. Oh, okay. Where's that? Edgecliff. Ah, I see. Right. So if you stop working right now, would you be bankrupt? Oh, yeah. So, my choices have been different in a way. My ethics were not about acquisition of material or money. Don't get me wrong, I like being comfortable.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
But I don't need to drive a $450,000 Ferrari when a $50,000 car can do it. And even then, I'm sometimes going, that was a bit, indulgent.
Yeah. I can't part with my 2003 Toyota Echo, right? So, I think I claim that as it's because I'm very woke, right? So,
hold on to that.
As opposed to very poor. But anyway, that's another discussion. Look, I think they just opened up a huge opportunity to talk, and I noticed we've almost run out of time. But so we might have to have another session sometime down the track because there's so much there. But I love how we're asking men because it feels good, right? Because it is good, right? In the end, you'll gain more from making these changes from an inside, from a really high value place, right? But one thing I'd like to finish up with is some ideas, right? So we've got patriarchy as a framework for training men to, put their head down and focus on other people's agendas and values, not ours, right? So we want to, this all serves someone else that we don't. It's not our family or our community, it's others. What do we replace them with? What the aspects of patriarchy you've described in your book as, territorialism, hierarchicalism, acquisitionalism, competition, combativeness, and those 5 things we kind of driven with. What do we replace them with? What's the new bloke? How is he going to start to work towards, connecting in relationships and
in the mirror?
Yeah, look in the mirror. Yeah.
That's it. That is fundamentally the first step, is look in the mirror. Not your muscles, not the pimple on your forehead, not whether your gut's hanging down to your knees. Look into your eyes in the mirror. They are the window to the soul. And then the next bit is finding people, and this is where my interest in my research at the moment is therapists who are self-aware of their own stuff in this and have actively or are actively working in it and working with other therapists, so we can deliver a process, not just in therapy, but in education, in mentoring and in coaching, that is consciously aware. The other stuff is unconscious. The dragon's asleep. And we need to wake the dragon. Now, that comes with a risk, right? Part of it is like, if I take these clothes off, I'm going to be naked. Well, that's good, right? Might be a bit chilly in the wind, but, it'll make you think about what you need to do.
Going back to some very basic places, right? Yeah.
And I think we need to really connect the shifts within all the cultures. Like, I talk about the male culture, the patriarchal culture, right? The therapist culture is another culture.
Yeah.
And they don't overlap well.
Right.
As a male therapist, I'm meant to be empathic, right? I am meant to be reflective.
Yeah.
Patriarchal men are not empathic, generally speaking, and they're not reflective.
Yeah.
So they're a clash. And remember, if you come back to the neurotic complex, we're now in a state of anxiety. Who am I here? So our sense of personhood is diminished. And I'm going, okay, we need reaffirming our personhood within a new framework. We need to, and as a hippie, raise your consciousness, until you don't need an ego anymore.
Absolutely. I love that, moving away from ego from I to thou, right?
Yes. Martin Buber.
Martin Buber. Yeah. I love that philosophy, right? But it's interesting. It takes courage to let go of all of that old framework that we're clinging to, the scaffold that we build our less fulfilling lives. We've got to build a new scaffold. How do we let those tendrils, that grip that the patriarchy has, how do we let it go?
Well, apart from, like the first step, as I said, was look into your eyes in the mirror. Yeah. That's metaphorical as much as it is practical.
Right.
If I take it the next step, it means really taking away all my defenses and looking at the wound. And I need a safe relationship to do that with. Right. That could be a coach, a mentor, a teacher. Right. And within that, explore how I relate. Yeah. Both non-verbally but verbally, and have someone feed back to me how that's coming across so I can grow. It's a bit like socializing a child. No, you can't have Johnny's truck. That's his truck, and he doesn't want to share it right now. And punching him in the face doesn't make it right that you have his truck. Yes, but he won't share. I get that. So if he doesn't share ever, you have a right to choose whether you want to play with Johnny or not. Right? And so that socialization process continues, right?
So growing up really is just, applying advanced adult socialization techniques, right? So,
because my metaphor, my analogy often is that culturally as men, we're stuck in the playground. 16-year-olds. High risk takers. Oh my God, I've got 55-year-olds just doing the same that they did when I was 16, but the body is actually telling them to back up. And they're not listening.
They're getting a somatic message rather than a values message. Right?
So the message is, if you're going to change and if it's going to be good for you, funnily enough, you'll live longer. Not because you're avoiding accidents, but because your whole body operates differently.
Yeah, that's brilliant. I wanted to explore relationships and men, and your experience of that. And of course, your relationship and the insights and lived experience. But I can't keep you all day, right? So I have to let you go. But I hope to do another chat at some point in the future. Thank you so much for answering some of my sort of clumsy questions. But
not clumsy. No question is clumsy.
Well, curiosity is wonderful.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. And so thank you for sharing a little bit of yourself and your work and your ideas. It's been very, very rich, mate, and I really appreciate it. Thank you for being a Kintsugi hero.
Thank you, John. I've really enjoyed it. We always have a good rap. I'm happy to come on again.
I'm looking forward to it. We'll definitely get a series because this is such important stuff. And I'm with you. As a final statement, I would ask men to reach out to someone for conversations where they can start to explore some of the things that might be lit up, whether they're angry or they're worried or whatever. From listening to this, that's good. Because we want those conversations to change the world, right? So love your work. Thanks, mate.
Thanks, John. Speak to you soon.
Cheers.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Kintsugi Heroes. Thank you to Colin Lilly for permission to use Broken as our theme music for this series. If you enjoyed this conversation, share the podcast with a friend and let us know by leaving a rating and review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. If you'd like to support Kintsugi Heroes and the stories we share, head to kintsugiheroes.com.au and follow the instructions to make a tax-deductible donation. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.